Thank everyone for coming. My name is Karen Foster, and I'm excited to have these three fantastic women here as well. Ashley Madden with Hutchinson Family Offices.
Very good.
And
Soon to be rebranded, so you
yeah, soon to be rebranded. Now I've got to remember it all over again. And then Corinne Auman, and she's with Choice Care Navigators, and Susan Hunt with Susan Hunt Law. And first, what we're going to do is each of us are going to talk a little bit about who we are, and then we've got a list of questions and to discuss. But please feel free. We've got a small little group here. Raise your hand because the purpose is to help you. And so just a little bit about me. Again, I've been in real estate for 17 years and been with a company called EXP for the last 6 years. But over the last 3 to 4 years, I've been fortunate enough to help a lot of people downsize to a smaller home, a continuing care facility, or near their children. Everybody's experience is different, but it's been a joy helping them transitioning to the next chapter in their life. So we've been able to put together a fantastic team of people, some stagers, photographers, we have movers, we have estate sale people, and many more that help in that transition process. It's an emotional process, and it's something that a lot of us don't like to talk about. What we're here to help and listen and guide you every step of the way. And like I said, everyone is different, and everyone has their own story. So some people are very prepared, they know exactly what they want, and some people have no clue what they want to do or move to. But what I do have realized is that having a will, having directives of what is important in case of emergencies is very important. And so those are some of the things that we're going to talk about here. Also, there's been tons of new businesses popping up, catering towards seniors, and navigating those is really a full-time job. And that's where someone like Corinne comes in and helping you navigate through some of those companies and finding out what is best for you. But a lot of what I like to do is tell things in a story. And one person that really actually motivated me to do something like this, because I saw such a great need, is this one client who her husband passed away, and he did everything. And she didn't know where the will was. We couldn't find the will. Finally, after a couple of weeks, we found the will stuck in this little closet. All of her children lived out of state. One lived all the way across in Washington, another one in DC, and she didn't have any help or support. But what we did, through working with one of her sons, got her into a home, a continuing care place, so that she was taken care of. That was our number one priority. Then what we did was we helped shred all they must have had 30, 50 boxes, because she also did all the taxes for her mom. Then it passed away 20 years ago, but she still had all the tax information. So we got the shredding company in to shred everything. We got an estate movers to help move the furniture that she needed to go into her new home. Then we got an estate sale, and they sold everything. So she did not have to worry. That was our goal, was to take all the pressure off of her and her sons who weren't there to help her. And then we have another client who was extremely organized, had everything lined up, knew what She was going to knew the floor plan of exactly what furniture to move, the rest of the furniture, who she was going to donate it to. It was awesome. I wish I could be that organized. But then what we did was we took, once all that, she moved everything out, we came in, we painted, we got stagers in to stage the house and got our home sold. So everyone has a story. And what we found is also everyone needs to plan, and so that you are empowered to do something for yourself now in planning for the future. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So that's my story. And if you want to go next.
Okay, great. You use so many words that I love and that I think translate to the work that I do. And I'm Ashley Madden. I'm the Director of Financial Planning Services for a firm called Hutchinson Family Offices. And Hutchinson Family Offices focuses on high net worth individuals, business owners. We work with people that have gone through divorce, transition. We work with widows and widowers. We work with couples. So we do have a lot of clients that are transitioning into the next phase of life from their working years. So certainly I have a critical eye and expertise with the financial planning, with the numbers, with the tax considerations that go along with that transition. But what I love about what Karen is saying is that everyone is unique. And whenever we have changes in our life, whether it is changing jobs, changing homes, divorcing a spouse, losing a spouse, the birth of a grandchild, all of these life events typically have financial implications. But first and foremost, they're events in your life. And so I like to say that there's the numbers, but then there's the story behind the numbers. Another thing that you said that really resonated with me with the work that I do is that sometimes we start working with oftentimes a female, but not always, but someone who has gone through a transition. That's what's brought them to our firm, whether it's divorce or losing a spouse, and they don't have any experience with the finances. And it can be incredibly overwhelming. They feel nervous. They may have been felt that they were really pushed aside by prior advisors, that they don't feel encouraged to ask questions. I am always trying to say, let's play a long game with this and help you build your confidence, help you build your financial literacy. I think it's so important to kind of take the mystery out of finances. So to take a step back, I just want to say that a lot of what you said resonated with me, but I have actually been in financial planning for over 20 years now. I started out selling health insurance out of my car up in the mountains of North Carolina in 2000, so almost 24 years ago. Ran my own company in Asheville doing insurance and some more basic financial planning services. Came back to Greensboro, my hometown, in 2005 to be nearer to my parents. Joined a great financial planning firm with a big focus on financial planning for women in 2005. I became a certified financial planner, or a CFP, which is just the hallmark for financial planners, in 2008. And then I decided to go back to school, get my master's of accounting and my CPA designation in 2013. I spent a few years working in public accounting and got some great expertise with a local, very well-established public accounting firm. And I got to work with a lot of business owners, particularly medical practices, on their transitioning of their businesses, retiring, real estate involved with those businesses. And then in 2018, I was given the opportunity to come out of the trenches of public accounting, out of the 60 to 70 hour work weeks of public accounting during tax season, and to really start the tax program for Hutchinson Family Offices. They were doing some tax work, but they really wanted to formally have a process in place, a dedicated person with that's a CPA, So I'm pleased to say that since 2018, when I joined the firm, we have more than doubled our assets under management, and we've also more than doubled the tax work that we do. So with that in mind, I'm actually in the process of hiring a new tax person so that I can focus my efforts on the more advanced planning for our high net worth and family office clients, building my own investment business, and working with business owners strategically on their exit planning. So I've worked a lot with retirees over the years in various capacities. And one thing I want to say is that I think that everything starts with a plan. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a formal plan. But again, getting back to what Karen was saying, to go in with some idea of what you're doing, to have run the numbers at some level, I think is really important when you're looking, whether it's to transition from your income working years to retirement years. And I use that term very loosely because retirement is a lot more fluid than it used to be. People are still continuing to work. Maybe they have they're a more flexible job, but we do see a lot of people continue to work. So I hesitate to even talk about retirement because it's changed so much. But I encourage people to think about themselves like a business. Whether you have a formal financial plan or not, think about your balance sheet, your assets and your liabilities. Your assets could be certainly your primary residence, investment portfolios, retirement accounts, rental property that you may own, a business. A lot of people still have a business. So what are your assets? And then minus your liabilities. So that gives you a snapshot of your net worth. But then that's a snapshot in the day-to-day. So again, thinking about it like a business runs a balance sheet for a particular day. It's a snapshot in time, okay? But then you have your income statement. And again, think of yourself like a business. You have money coming in the form of income. That is usually a transition for people when they move out of their working years. And then you have your expenses. And this is really where the crux lies in, because the success of the plan is thinking about your expenses in relation to your income. And I'm always looking at this with our clients. We have a formal financial planning software we use, but I talk about surplus cash flow or deficit cash flow. And at a high level, I try and get my clients to think about that. Are you bringing in more than you're spending, or are you spending more than you're bringing in? So obviously it can get a lot more complex than that. Taxes are a big consideration. They're, for most people, the biggest expense that they have. And so I think everyone needs to think about their own planning in terms of treating themselves like a business. But then when we think about someone transitioning into retirement, looking at selling their home, we certainly have worked with a lot of clients on that process. And we were asked to share a story. So I will share my most personal story with transitioning someone out of their home, which is my mother. And she's here today. So we went through a process. My father passed away 4 years ago, and my mother had been in the family home for a number of years, and they had lived in that home since the late 90s. So understandably, there was an emotional attachment to the home for all of us. And also there was a lot of stuff. So we decided she's on the waiting list. Hopefully we'll be talking a little bit about retirement communities and the challenges and wait lists and things like that. So she's been on the wait list. And so we made a somewhat unconventional but successful for our family decision for myself and my fiance to transition into the family home and transition my mother into a smaller one-level home. And I can say that going through that process gave me a different perspective, again, thinking about all the numbers that are involved, but really to experience firsthand the physical challenges of downsizing, the emotional challenges of downsize, the time involved we ended up not using like an estate sale company, although we looked at it extensively. But I think that that's something that really needs to be considered, and Karen and Corinne could certainly speak to this, that you want to plan ahead for this process. It can take a lot of time, and it can involve some emotional stress. So for any family members that are involved in the process, to recognize that, acknowledge it, and to accept it as part of the process. So that's just a little bit about me, the work that I do, and my own personal story with transitioning. And
Well, one thing you didn't mention is that smaller home was your home.
yes. So we
So you swapped.
We swapped homes. We did, and it is a little unconventional, but it worked for our family, and we're still in process of. But Mom is enjoying her lovely home, and it got a fresh start. And I'm going to give her a lot of credit, because I think one of the biggest challenges, I see this with clients, I hear it anecdotally, is that sometimes it's really hard for people to let go of their stuff. And to some extent, I see my friend Beth is nodding. And I mean, you just can't underestimate this. I think it's harder for some people than others, but you may want your next generation to take all the china that you may
not want it.
You may think that there's a valuable place for the ballerina figurines from the 1960s that you inherited from your great aunt, and there may not be a home for these things. So, that can be challenging as well. So.
My turn?
Yeah.
So I'm Corinne Auman. I run a company called Choice Care Navigators here in Greensboro, and we help families navigate senior care, right? We typically are working either with the senior or a spouse themselves, but often it's the adult children of an older adult who are trying to figure out, what can we do? And I love it. I love it when people come to me and they're downsizing and they're thinking ahead and they're making a great plan of what's going to happen. I am thrilled to talk to those individuals. Unfortunately, that is not my typical phone call. My typical phone call is everything was fine until, and you fill in the blank with some sort of health event. Usually it's a fall, it's a heart attack, it's a stroke. Everyone was fine until, and now someone is in the hospital and nobody knows where any of the paperwork is, and nobody knows how senior health care works. What do you mean Medicare doesn't pay for assisted living? What do you mean Medicare doesn't pay for home care? Everyone's in a panic. We often joke, but it's not really a joke, that we are part-time therapists, because we take people in during a crisis, and they're kind of like cats that have their claws in the ceiling because they're so stressed out, and we're kind of trying to coax them off the ceiling. Like, no, really, come down. It's going to be okay. We'll figure this out and we'll work through it. So many people do not plan ahead, think ahead. And the antidote to your story with my own parents, which I was just telling Sue before we got started, because of course, no one has to listen to their own children ever. And so if someone changed your diaper, they don't listen to you. So my dad and mom don't listen to me at all, even though I've been in this for over 20 years as well. So my dad has said for years that he was going to house swap with myself or my brother, because we had one-story ranch homes. When this first started, we both had one-story ranch homes, and he's in a house that is not built for older adults at all, and he is 80 and has Parkinson's. And he's like, I'm going to switch houses with you when it's time. When it's time. When I need to, I'm going to switch. He's been saying that for at least 15 years.
So Brenda gets the gold star.
Brenda gets the total gold star. But
She didn't
I think
need
this
to.
is
She did it.
I think this is a really common thing, that we do kind of get trapped by the box that is our house and our stuff that is in it. And it becomes very hard to make that next step of well, what am I going to do when this doesn't work for me anymore? And planning, even if you're not making a change right now, planning for that contingency so that everybody else in your family knows what you want to have happen if something occurs. Because that's a big thing too. You know, something has happened, there's been some sort of event and someone's got a big health change. We as a family are going to have to make a lot of changes. Do your children or your loved ones or whoever it is, do they even know what you want in terms of next steps? Do you want to stay at home and have home care? Okay, great. How are we going to pay for that? What does it cost? Do you have a home care agency picked out? Do you have a friend who said they were going to do it? Do you want to go to assisted living? Have you already signed up for the wait list at Friends Home? All those sorts of things. And it is amazing to me how many times the person I'm talking to in that crisis situation has no idea what their loved one wanted. You know, I don't know if they want to come home. I assume they want to come home. I had one family that we got into that kind of crisis moment, and then we found out that they were on the wait list at Friends Home. And the adult children had no idea that they had ever even gone out there and looked. So those kinds of discussions are very empowering to everyone else in your family. And I always joke with people, but the best way to not get what you want as an older adult is to not tell anybody, right? Like not have a discussion, not talk about it, not do anything with it. So again, I like those pre-planning phone calls. I don't get them nearly often enough. I get the crisis phone calls. When somebody does call us in crisis, we as a care management agency help guide them through all those decision-making processes, help them figure out what the options are, how they're going to pay for them, if they'll qualify for any like resources like Medicaid, if they've got a long-term care insurance policy that they've forgotten about that's buried in a drawer somewhere. Sometimes that happens. Things like that. And then, so we'll help them navigate a crisis. The other thing that we do is kind of ongoing care management and or guardianship with families. So it's myself, I have a social worker, I have 2 nurses on staff, and we will kind of be like adult sons and daughters for hire in the sense that we'll go visit every week. We'll send the nurse to fill the pill boxes. We'll get the groceries. We'll do all those sorts of things that adult children would do if they were close by or if they didn't have full-time jobs and children that they were raising themselves, that kind of thing. A lot of our clients, have family scattered across the country, and those adult kids or family members just need somebody to coordinate everything, right? Make sure mom or dad is getting to the doctor's appointments and what happened at the doctor's appointment. Because when you talk to mom or dad, they say, oh, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Everything was great. Doctor didn't have anything to say. That's often not true. So those are the kinds of ongoing things that we do as well. I think that's my story.
So I was talking to a man recently who is in a big house with a big yard, and I said, so what is your plan? Like, what's your long-term plan for being in this home? I'm just kind of tagging off of you, Corinne. And he said, well, I just see myself here working in the yard and working in the park until I'm 90. And I thought, that is probably not a really good plan. And while that sounds lovely, and if it would work out, yeah, that would be great. But the likelihood of that happening is very slim. And so I'm Sue Hunt. I do estate planning, and I love a good plan. And an estate plan doesn't just mean a will and a power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney. It means a plan for your life, and it incorporates everything that we're all talking about today. I've been practicing in Guilford County for 30 years now, and I started out as a family law attorney thinking that I wanted to help families make the divorce process not so awful. And I think I did to a degree, but I also learned that it is an awful business to be in. So I always say, despite being a redhead, I am not a fighter, and so I didn't like litigation one bit. So I found my way into real estate and estate planning, and over the years had a really great real estate practice and did closings for folks and was also doing estate planning. And then realized that if I wanted more control over my own life, talking about planning, I needed to let go of real estate because it was controlling my life. It determined when or if I could ever take a vacation or what my daily schedule was, because we're having to meet everyone else's schedules. So I phased out of that to only do estate planning back in 2015. So that is solely what I do. And my goal as an estate planning attorney is to minimize what people have to go through in the end. If we can avoid probate, great. If we can at least minimize the things that are going through probate, great. So every individual's plan is different. There's, I don't believe that everyone needs everyone has to do a trust. I don't believe that. Everyone does need some sort of a plan. And I say that for an 18-year-old on up. Your kids hit 18, your grandkids hit 18, they need to be doing a power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney. And if they're going off to college, a FERPA authorization. Because as parents, they no longer have control over those 18-year-olds. They may think they do, but they don't. So I start with planning, all the way when someone has nothing to high-end estate planning and really looking at the transitions that happen in life. And just like Ashley mentioned, life events impact your estate planning as well. So if you have new grandkids, or you lose a spouse, or you get divorced, or just whatever those transitions are, retirement, buying a new business, all of those make a difference in what you've put together in your plan. So we're huge proponents of making sure that our clients are updating their plan. So every year we're reminding them if any of these things happen. It's a long laundry list of different life events that could have impacted planning, but there are also changes in the law. We have some big ones coming up in the next couple of years. We had some big ones that occurred back in 2018 and 2020. So all of that not only impacts estate planning, it impacts financial planning as well. So as an estate planning attorney, I dive deep. It's, I think a lot of people believe that you can just walk into an estate planning attorney's office and say, hey, I need a will. I just want to leave everything to my spouse and then my kids. And it's as easy as that. And it's not, because there are so many different things that you're not thinking about that can impact planning. I could tell so many stories about that, but a good, for example, is I had someone call recently who wanted to make sure that the house would pass to the kids, wanted to make sure that if they had to go into a nursing home, the nursing home wasn't going to get it. And that's one myth that I am continuously debunking, I guess, that the nursing home doesn't take a home. The nursing home gets paid. And if you have assets, you have to pay for the nursing home. If you own a home at your death, the nursing home doesn't take it back. There are ways you can protect it, but the nursing home isn't taking money. They're just getting paid for taking care of you and providing medical care and food and shelter and utilities and all of these sorts of things. Medicaid might say, if you own a home at your death, they want to take it. You have to sell it so they can get some of their money back, but they don't take it. They just get reimbursed. So there are ways in planning that you can do that. So a woman called and said, I want to protect my home for my kids so that it can pass to them later. I want to make sure the nursing home doesn't get it. She and her spouse had never done any estate planning. And so the more we talked, we then learned that at that point, her husband had dementia and was unable to handle, to sign anything. So no power of attorney, no healthcare directives, and no ability now for us to do what she's asking us to do. She could do her own plan, but there's, short of getting guardianship over her spouse, she has no decision-making authority for him. So that's, for me, one of the, and that's not an unusual story. It's not unusual for someone to call and say, hey, my spouse has dementia and I need to get these things done, and our hands are tied because they haven't done anything. So even a good power of attorney would have taken care of all of that. It would have resolved a good one. Now, a statutory power of attorney that you can pull online is not necessarily a good one. It'll get by for some things, but a very thorough one that allows trust planning, that allows executing deeds, that allows all of these different things that these clients are asking us to do would enable that to happen. So I tell everyone, do something, get a basic plan, get a power of attorney. I always say I worry more about what happens to me while I'm living than what happens to my stuff after I'm gone. These are perfect examples of it. Another big one that comes up for me is I've reviewed a lot of trusts that other attorneys have done in the past and find that they have this beautiful document that says where everything is going to go with the intent that it avoids probate, and then nothing is in it. So nothing is in it.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that everything they own goes through probate, only to then get moved over to the trust to then be administered through the terms of the trust. Well, probate is a bit of a mess sometimes. So you don't have to put vehicles into a trust. It sometimes is difficult and a little tedious. But I worked with some folks who had collector vehicles, and they had done everything to get them into the trust except to go to DMV, signed the titles, did all that work, didn't go to DMV. And then the owner of the vehicles passed away. And now we have car titles that can't be used. So we're having to get some new car titles. The spouse wanted to sell things. Also learned that there was an account that we never knew about that never made its way into the trust. So while it didn't turn out to be a big probate estate, it for the widow was really confusing and frustrating. And, when she thought going into this, everything was going to be smooth and easy, and then it wasn't. And that's a big one that we see is people will go a step to put a pretty plan together, but not get things in it. I am a stickler about making sure my clients have everything they have direct, maybe of a vehicle, but not collector's vehicles, that in some form or fashion, they're directed into it so that we can avoid probate. So those are, I think, the big things that pop up for me. Blended families are another big issue that I see, that a simple will says, I leave everything to my spouse, and then I want it to go to my kids or our kids after we're both gone. Well, in a blended family, not even hypothetically, what happens often is that one spouse dies, the step parent ends up with all of the assets, and they either don't retain a relationship with the stepchildren, or they remarry and have this whole new family, and now everything passes to where they want it to go and bypasses the deceased spouse's children. So with blended families, there are great ways of protecting the children on both sides and protecting both spouses and maintaining control after death. So those I would say are my big stories. I have a fabulous team at my office. We have 6 in the office, 3 attorneys. 2 of us do planning, 1 does estate administration, and then we have 3 amazing support staff in the office. And so we're very organized and systematized, and I love what I do. So
That's great.
that's
Well,
Susan Hunt Law.
I think everybody has said the one reason why we're all here is nobody wants to think about this.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to plan it. Nobody wants to. I remember talking about doing a will, and my son said, we don't need to worry about that. That's going to be a long time away. You're right. But you still need to plan it. You still need to have it. And I think one key thing, kind of like what I said, is letting people know where it is. They don't need to know what it is, just where it is.
Mm-hmm.
And one you kind of touched on a little, Sue, is I remember I was on, I think, Nextdoor or something. I don't go on there very often, but someone said, where can I go to get a will done? And everyone was recommending online wills. So you want to touch on that just a little bit? I mean, I made a little comment, everyone's unique, and do not go
Yeah.
on.
I should pay more attention to Nextdoor.
LegalZoom is not your friend.
Oh my gosh,
It is not
LegalZoom
your
is
friend.
not your friend. It's so I've reviewed some of those for folks, and they have been atrocious, especially when someone has children. They always will screw it up. And what happens if someone has children and screws up a will is that when the children inherit assets and they're under 18, they have to have a court-appointed guardian to manage their assets for them until they turn 18. That could be the surviving parent, but there's so many things, kind of like I said in the beginning of this, there's so many questions that you don't even know to ask. And that's my job as an attorney, is to make sure you understand, for me to understand what your family dynamics are, and to get you to think about what your decision about planning really means. So if you say, I want it to go to my kids or then their kids, all right, how old are their kids? Do we have any family members with special needs, or who are spendthrifts, who don't manage money well, or who have addictions? Are there older family members that we want to provide for? There's so many different components to estate planning that LegalZoom doesn't ask. LegalZoom's going to give you some basic questions to answer, and if you aren't thinking through the what ifs of your answer to that, you end up with a bad plan.
So that's a good answer. So contact someone so that you can get a personalized plan.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You mentioned probate. A lot of people don't know what probate is. What is the probate process, and some of the pros and cons of going that way?
So the probate process, when someone passes away, whether they have a will or not, the administrator or executor of the estate opens an estate by applying to the court for letters of administration or letters testamentary. It's $120 in North Carolina to open the estate, and then about another $170 or so to put a notice in the newspaper to creditors. So if there are any unknown creditors, they can make a claim against the estate because they get paid before your family does. And then the executor sends a written notice to anybody that they know you owe money to, and then give an inventory to the clerk of court saying, here's what we think the probate assets are. Well, then 90 days out, 3 months later, they have to give another inventory to the clerk saying, okay, well, here are the claims against the estate. Here are the assets of the estate that we've now discovered, that we finally have our letters testamentary and can get more information. So those letters are what allows the executor to go to the bank and access the decedent's money, or to go to the financial advisor and collect things that don't have a beneficiary designation. And then after that 3-month window, they're giving the inventory to the clerk and then paying the clerk or the state 40 cents for every $100 of assets that pass through probate. And then sometime between that 3 months and usually about a year out, they're giving the clerk of court all sorts of paperwork, the proof that funeral expenses were paid and bank statements and that sort of thing. And then they do a final accounting, hoping that all of their numbers match up. This is where people usually get lost. And then the clerk will either approve it or not. If they approve it, they can close the estate. If they don't, they're going to have to produce some more information. A typical probate is about a year-long process. The advantage of it is that it's overseen by the courts. So there's deadlines and requirements that the executor or administrator has to meet. If they don't meet that, they get served by the sheriff and are basically forced to complete that. The disadvantage is it can be drawn out, that you have these creditors who have priority over your own family members. It's tedious. It's a lot of paperwork. So when you're choosing an administrator or executor, you really want to think about someone who gets things done, who's organized, who works well on a timeline, and who is fair and can treat the rest of your family members fair. One of the worst things I see is people will just say, well, I'm going to name my kids in order of age, and those kids don't get along. And one is using funds for their own needs, or any number of things go wrong with it, and the family fractures. And so again, for planning for me, I'm trying to create this in such a way that I don't create a fracture in the family on the back end of it as well. But the probate process is ugly. For a full administration, over 20,000. A small administration is 20,000 or less. And so a small administration, and there are some exceptions to that, like for a spousal allowance or a children's allowance for under 18. But in general, it's that 20,000 that triggers it. The main disadvantage of that is that executor, unless they're a beneficiary of the will have to post bond. Just like, when someone gets out of jail, it's, they go to the bail bondsman. That's exactly what they do. And the bond is based on the value of the probate estate. And they will pay out of pocket to do that.
Can you, because I've seen this, talk about the advantages or disadvantages of having co-executors? Please.
Co-executors. Yeah. Co-powers of attorney, co-executors, co-healthcare agents. Sometimes in healthcare I might do it, but I always will look at, well, what do we do in a healthcare power of attorney? What we do if they don't agree. So then I'll say, and if they don't agree, it's in this order. But I can't do that in a will because the clerk of court is going to say, sorry, that doesn't work that way. So if you have co-executors, you name both of your kids or three of your kids to agree on everything and how the estate is going to get administered, and they all have to sign off on everything, and they don't agree, or one is out of state and can't get to what they need to get to, it becomes problematic. But I think the biggest issue is not agreeing, and that's pretty normal. That would be a typical scenario. I see very few estate administrations where all of the family members are completely aligned with one another in what they want to have happen.
So the reason I brought that up, I had a family that we worked with. There were 4 adult children, 2 in Greensboro, 1 in Charlotte, and 1 out of state. And the parent had named them all 4 co-executors. And it was a nightmare. And they did not get along. So
Great.
It was super, super fun.
And none of them want to give it up. So nobody will say, well, I'll renounce, I'll resign and let you take it over.
But it was the parents' way of trying to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to show preference. They didn't want to pick. So they made them all 4.
I have that conversation often. Yeah. So an executor is when someone has a will, they appoint an executor. There's no difference in it. It's just, it's an administrator if you die without a will. So they get letters of administration. They get letters testamentary as an executor. It does the same thing. Will versus no will.
What are some good things? We were talking about adult children and to have conversations with their parents on what their plans are. And that's a conversation that's really hard to have. Do you have any suggestions or handouts or anything like that you can give to those adult children to work through that with their parents?
So I always compare having this conversation with your parents, kind of like having the birds and the bees conversation with your children. And there is a lot of similarity. Like you think I'm kidding, but having that conversation with your children is uncomfortable. And we all kind of want to deny that our kids are ever going to have any sort of romantic relations until they're like 30, so we'll talk about it when it's time. And, but it's uncomfortable. We put it off, we procrastinate. But there are real life consequences to not having those conversations, right? If I don't have that conversation with my children, I end up with grandchildren really early in life. Or I end up with kids with health issues that we don't want to have to deal with early in life. So I'm going to try to avoid those outcomes by having this difficult conversation. It makes them uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable, but we got to do it. Having this conversation with your older adult relatives. If you're an older adult and you're trying to have these conversations with your adult children and your adult children are going, la, 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 I don't want to hear it. We'll talk about that when it comes. Again, I think framing it in terms of empowerment really helps shift it, because then you're not saying we're going to talk about death and doom and despair. We're talking about how I get the very best outcome as I grow older that I can possibly have, and how I make sure that you, as my adult child, have as little stress, and you know exactly what I want, you know exactly where everything is, so that in a moment of crisis, when you're at the hospital and you're upset and stressed out, you know exactly who to call, you know exactly where the bank accounts are, you know exactly what I want you to do, so that we make a difficult situation as easy as it can possibly be. And so I think when you kind of shift it to that, instead of we're going to talk about something really super depressing, to no, I am empowering you to help me get what I want, and I'm empowering myself to actually get what I want, it helps see it in a much more positive way.
I want to piggyback on that with something we've seen. And I'll first say it's I've been working with business owners more and more with their exit planning, and we talk about exit planning is good business planning. And there's sometimes an unwillingness to discuss, to even talk about the exit planning process. And I think there's a lot of similarities with, like, if I acknowledge it, then it's real. So people kind of shy away. But I want to also talk about a difficult conversation about fraud, because we are having, I mean, I see it with our clients, but I know it's a much bigger issue. It's everywhere. We were talking about AI a little bit before. I mean, you hear about people that they can copy people's voices now, and people are getting calls from who they think is a child saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. I need you to send me money," or having scams related to Venmo or Zelle. The pay apps. We're seeing scams with dating websites. We're seeing scams where people call and say, "I'm the IRS," or "I'm the police department. You've got a legal issue. You've got a tax issue." And I think these are things that we all need to be vigilant about, but we also need to be aware of it for our, either if you are a senior or if you are dealing with a senior loved one, to realize that for them to bring this to you, they may feel embarrassed. They may feel scared that you're going to think that they can't handle things themselves anymore. But it's a very, very real concern, and a lot of people are getting caught up in it and losing money in the process.
To speak to that, I've worked with a family whose father, who seems pretty doggone sharp, and he's got caught up in one, is adamant that it's legit, and has given away probably close to $1 million. And it's created a problem in the family, for one, because the guy is competent, and that they're trying to stop the bleeding, and he's saying, "Well, you're just trying to get all my money," and potentially wanting to cut them out of the estate, or whatever that might look like. So it is very real, and it's so important to have these conversations now, and maybe even talk to your friends, and not and your kids, to say, "Hey, watch out for me," and to make sure that if anything happens, your kid, if a grandchild says, "I'm in Africa and I can't get out until I get $100,000," verify that. Do some legwork on that before getting caught up in it. It's really easy to to get duped. So we need to be counting on each other to look out for
I
one
remember
another.
I got a phone call from my dad, that same thing, my sister's daughter.
Yeah.
That she was in Mexico. Don't tell mom, and I'm in jail, and but he called me. Do you know where Samantha is? And it's a scam. So, but at least he called,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
very important to kind of
And
reach
to not
out.
give any information over the phone, not to give.
No.
We had an incident recently where the person was told it was the utility company, and your utilities are going to get cut off, and we need your social security number. Boom, just like that. And there ended up being credit card fraud. We've now had to do an IP PIN process for the tax return filing. So it can happen so quick. And, she said to me, I knew as I was saying the numbers that I shouldn't be. And she's like, but it just came out. I mean, and it's so easy to happen. And as soon as it happens, you've lost control. So something for all of
Those
us to be
companies
aware
don't
of.
call. IRS doesn't call. Utility companies don't call. You get letters.
Where they call, say, okay, hang up, look
Call
up
a real
the phone
one.
number, and then call them back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Which is
actually,
probably a discontinued number. It's not a.
we had a
real
gentleman that we actually stopped at the UPS store as he had gone to the bank and gotten out $20,000 in cash. And yes, the bank let him take out $20,000 in cash, and he had gone to the UPS store and was boxing it up to ship to this woman that loved him, and she needed the money, and he was sending it to her because she loved him. It was a romance scam. And the daughter called us and said he had gone, and she said, I don't know where he went. And we tracked him down to the UPS and Friendly Center
Wow.
with the money, boxing it up. So it happens all the time. And the one thing I want to mention about that is talk about the scams. If you hear about a new scam, every time I hear about some new scam, I am calling my mother and saying, this is the new scam. Here's the new thing, because they're so good. They change so fast. It's hard to keep up with, but I think telling your loved ones, hey, this is the new scam, watch out for this, is really important, because it's really hard to keep up with for anybody. But if you know you've got loved ones in your life who could be vulnerable to that, make sure they know what that latest scam is. And
So one of-
that's
I was going to say, so one of the questions that comes up is like, well, when should I get my estate planning done? It's like, at least the day before you die. Do you know when you're going to die?
Right.
No, you don't. So it's kind of speaking to what Jeff was saying. It's having a team of advisors is one of the best things you can do. Have someone in the financial services industry that you know and that you're working with and that knows what your assets are. Have your estate plan done. Have a good CPA. Have all of these different resources aligned so that when any issue arises, you know who to pick up the phone and call. And it's not even a large number of people. You could pick up the phone with any one of us, and we can tell you what the next step is.
No, what I was going to say is my answer to that kind of, when should I have it? Today, right? Like, because we think about aging or growing older as something that old people do, but we're going to be older at the end of the seminar than we were at the beginning of it. So it's not something old people do. And you're right. We don't know, we could, heaven forbid, but we don't know what's going to happen when we walk out the door, and everyone should have it. There's no, I'm going to wait until it's time. The time is today, or it was yesterday. It's not, some unknown time in the future that you think is never going to come.
You know, a lot of times people will get a terminal diagnosis and don't want to face that they're going to die. And so they put off planning. And we dealt with this not too long ago with someone who had been ill for quite some time and knew there was a fairly short time frame for his life. And so the advisor contacted us, asked us to work with them, and we got them lined up. We were ready to go out there that day, and they said, no, I think we can wait. And then it was just a matter of days that said, no, we need you now. So we had to drop
everything
what we're
and go,
doing
yeah.
and get over to their home to get it done. And he, I think died within a couple of days after that. But, being proactive, especially if someone in the family has gotten a life-altering diagnosis, don't wait. Do it while you can. The worst ones are someone gets diagnosed with dementia and they put it off so long that when the family is ready for them to do it, they no longer
They can't legally sign anything.
And it's that you need to have a plan for the assets. I'm so glad you touched on the probate thing, because our goal is always to just have, and I just love it when everything just flows seamlessly. Everything goes where it's supposed to go, beneficiary designations. But the other thing is having a plan of care. We've had several clients lately who have been facing terminal illnesses. So to make sure that there's not just a clear plan for the assets, but to not, especially if there are multiple people involved on, the decision making, that there's really clear directives for
And sometimes I
care.
found too, if you have multiple children, it's really emotional for one of them and they don't want to talk about it. And the other one's like, well, we've got to get something done. And so that's where some of your skills, Corinne, comes into play too, is how do you work with them, like a situation like that, and determining what is the best strategy? Would it be moving to independent, assisted living, memory care, skilled? There's so many different types of care out there. There's facilities that keep popping up every day.
Yeah.
How do you kind of work with them in determining some of those?
Well, I think the first thing is education about what's available. The vast majority of people have no idea what those different words you just said, assisted living, memory care, independent living. They don't know what those things even, they know they drive by that pretty place that's senior housing, but they have no idea what actually goes on there.
Yeah.
And that's true of medical professionals as well. Doctors who are writing, there's a form you have to fill out to go into care. It's called an FL2. Often doctors fill those out incorrectly because they don't actually know the difference in the levels of care either, because they never go into these communities. They are in their hospital or in their medical practice, but they never go into them. So first of all, there's education about what those different levels are. Independent living is just apartments, right? Senior apartments that have nice wide hallways and handrails and safety bars in the bathrooms and things like that. Independent living typically has a call button, but they don't actually provide any medical services. If you pull the call button, they're going to come see that you're laying on the floor because you've fallen, and they're going to call 911. They're not actually going to provide you with any sort of hands-on care. Assisted living is when you need help with activities of daily living, so like bathing, dressing, grooming, medication management, those kinds of things. And then they have activities, they have lots of social things for you to do. So that can be really useful for someone who needs some kind of day-to-day help, but also maybe has become socially isolated in their home because their health has changed. So they can get somewhere where they're around a lot of other people and there's a lot of things for them to do. Because as we saw during COVID, social engagement is incredibly important, and being isolated in your home is not good for anybody.
No.
Memory care is basically assisted living, but with a secured building. So the doors, you can't just walk out the door, because one of the things that people with dementia love to do is walk. They kind of get up and going, and they will just go and go and go, and we don't want them to walk out the door and nobody know where they are or them get lost. The staff ratios are a little lower in memory care because people with dementia need more attention, and those caregivers are typically trained to work with people with dementia as well. And then the next step would be skilled nursing, which is you go to skilled nursing for one of two reasons. You go to skilled nursing because you've come out of a hospital stay and you need rehab, so speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and that's usually for somewhere between 20 and 100 days, depending on whether or not you're making progress in your therapy. If you go to therapy and skilled nursing and you're not doing your therapy, they're going to say, bye-bye, you got to go. So you got to be making progress the whole time. The other side of skilled nursing is people who live in skilled nursing long-term. Right? So that means they have some sort of physical need that requires a nurse and RN on staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like at an assisted living, you only have nursing staff Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. You have med techs and CNAs and other people the rest of the time. But at a skilled nursing, you have a nurse 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those long-term care beds, like you go live there a really long time. Number one, they're super expensive. So you're talking $7,000 to $10,000 a month minimum. There is a very high demand for Medicaid long-term beds because who can afford $7,000 to $10,000 a month in perpetuity? If you come to me and you say, my loved one needs to move into a Medicaid skilled nursing bed and we have no private pay funds, we need to go in straight Medicaid, you're looking at a 6 month to over a year wait to find your loved one a Medicaid bed. Now, if you come to me and you said, we're going to use Medicaid, but we've got a month or two of private pay funds for them to move in, well, I can probably get you in tomorrow. Because a community, and I'm not saying this is right or fair in any way, I'm just saying this is how it works. A community will welcome you if you have private pay for at least a month, and then they will let you transition to Medicaid. But they really don't want you coming in the door just using Medicaid because number one, they're not going to get any pay up front, and you're coming in what's called Medicaid pending, and they don't make any money off Medicaid beds either. So number one, there's a limit on those, and you have to kind of know how to work the system to even get in. So that's all the different levels and all the things that people have no idea about when they kind of drive by the pretty building and go, oh yeah, that's really
Well, we
nice.
ran into that when we moved. Mike's mom moved up to here, and she did have some vision issues. And anyway, we just immediately thought she needed assisted living. Well, she did not like that at all. They took her medicines away.
Yes,
they
that's true.
took all of her control away.
Yeah.
So she found another place to move to.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm not staying here. This is where I'm moving.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And it is true. You think, oh, they just need assistance. And that's not necessarily the case.
The number one thing that happens when somebody calls us and they are looking to move is we talk about what their needs are. And it is very common for the family to think they need this. Somebody who has dementia does not automatically need memory care.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people in independent and assisted living who have cognitive decline and or dementia who can function just fine. You don't really need to be in memory care until you are really disoriented to time and place and maybe you don't recognize people anymore. But families just automatically think, oh, dementia means we're going straight into memory care. And that's
Unless
not.
you're a flight risk.
Unless you're a flight
Unless you're a
risk.
flight risk.
If
This
you're
is
a
true.
wander risk, that's a big red flag.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you can end up not in your area. Typically, if you end up somewhere you don't want to be, we can work to get you moved to a community that's closer when a bed opens up.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually about where's the bed open at that moment. And so the hospital or wherever you're coming from is trying to find you a safe discharge, right? They just need a bed for you to go to. It may be close by, it may not. If you end up in that situation, we can get you moved. It's not that you have to stay in that place, but you may have to stay there until we find an opening. Yeah.
I just have to say, Corinne's office is really phenomenal. And when families are going through any of that, it would be so much easier to call her and understand what these options are and what's available than to try to figure them out yourselves. Because there's so many options, and she knows pretty much all of the facilities and what's going to make best sense for the family. So I just think your business is amazing.
And it's fluid. It's not like there's a list of the facilities and this is it, because in our area, we've been having big changes with the communities and remodeling and expanding, and
They
you know,
get
this
bought.
company,
They get bought and sold.
Yeah, this one has a
merging.
didn't have a waiting list, but now it has a waiting list, and the buy-ins are different, and
Well,
so
and
there's so many factors.
The Medicaid piece is a big one too, especially in assisted living. So if you go look on the state's website, almost every assisted living in North Carolina is Medicaid certified, and that means that they can accept Medicaid. That does not mean that they do accept Medicaid. And that changes all the time based on their census. If they have a lot of empty beds, they'll take Medicaid for a little while. But then once they get full enough, they won't take it anymore. And so it is always a moving target as to who is accepting it right now versus 6 months ago. And the state listing has nothing to do with who is actually accepting it. And people will call and they'll say, well, I see that, Spring Arbor is Medicaid certified. And it's like, they have never taken Medicaid a day that they've existed. But could they do it? If you were a long-term resident who'd been there for 5 years and you needed to go to Medicaid, they might do it for you. But it's not something that they typically do.
Can you talk a little bit about the waiting lists? Because I feel like we're seeing that more with our clients, and I'm encouraging people to not wait. I think that's been the trend of the talk today, is to not wait, but to realize that it's not like going to the grocery store and buying milk, that that some of the places in town really do have significant waiting lists.
So we talked about all those different levels of care: independent, assisted, memory care, skilled. There are two different kinds of communities. There are freestanding, privately held, for-profit communities. Those typically do not have big waiting lists. But places that are what we call continuing care retirement communities, CCRCs for short, this would be Friends Homes, Wellspring, Whitestone, Pennyburn, River Landing, those big communities. They have all those different levels of care on one campus, and it's typically very good quality care. People really like it. Very high quality.
Meals, gym, activities. I'm ready. Every time I go visit, I'm ready to move in.
Golf course, all the clubs, book clubs. That's right, all the things.
Bridge club,
And
golf.
those are nonprofit institutions where you have to put in a very large buy-in. People typically sell their home to put in a very large buy-in, and it's kind of like buying an insurance policy, and they're actually regulated by the Insurance Commission in North Carolina. You put in this big buy-in, and then you also have your monthly fees and monthly fees for healthcare if you need that are on top of that. But what you're getting in return is a guarantee that they're going to take care of you for the rest of your life. So like if they're going to financially vet you to make sure they don't think you're going to run out of money. But if you were to run out of money, they don't kick you out. And you get very, very good care, whatever level of care you're in. So those are the places that have the wait lists. And you may have seen, if you've driven by Friends Home lately, like they've been building like crazy. Pennyburn's been building like crazy. And this is because of the older adult population, the baby boomers that we have coming. And you just can't get in the door. My aunt, who is now at Friends Home, was on the wait list at Friends Home for 11 years. So you have to be thinking about where you want to be 11 years from now, not where you want to be 2 years from now. And I don't know what their wait list is right this minute. I haven't been out there, but it's not a wait and see kind of thing. It's if you think you would like to be there, go get on their wait list. There's usually a fee, $500, something like that, $1,000, but you get it back if you actually move in, and it's worth it. It's worth it if that's where you think you want to be, because yes, people will wait too long. They'll wait too long because of the wait list. They also wait too long because they think they're still fully independent because they're in their home and they're not fully independent. So in addition to that financial vetting, they also have a nurse vet you, because if you're going to move into independent living at a continuing care retirement community, you have to actually be independent. You can't be requiring care already. They're going to reject you, and people will wait until they actually need care, and then you can't move into independent living. And most of these communities typically do not do direct admits to their higher levels of care. So you can't just go directly into their assisted living or those kinds of things. So
And if you're married, both have to be.
both of you have to be independent, or you have to go
Yes.
into separate levels of
Separate
care.
places. Yeah.
Yes. They will do that. Like you might move into independent and your loved one might go into assisted and you would still get admitted. But yeah. So
Well,
I would,
what's the stat? By 2030, all of the baby boomers will be 65 or older.
Yeah.
So that
I would
whole
like to say
population.
that I'm working on this. So I just mentioned that I wrote a book. I wrote a book called Keenagers.
I
with a
love
K.
that name.
And it is about telling a new story about aging, thinking about aging differently. But it's about, there's stuff in there about planning and thinking about your retirement years differently. And that's, is it really retirement? But one of the things I'm trying to do with it, and I'm working on doing right now, is kind of developing like a course that people would take, because you think about like college. How much time and energy did people spend talking, or do people spend talking to 18-year-olds about those 4 years of your life, right? All the planning and all the testing and all the things. And we don't do anything.
Yeah.
We talk about financial planning, maybe, but we don't talk about anything else. We don't talk about health planning. We don't talk about social planning. We don't talk about emotional planning. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at in the book. And then I'm working on this course that I'm going to develop and hopefully people will take. But is the idea that we're going to plan, right? We're going to take a course and you're going to plan for not only the financial piece, but all these other things that you need to think about to get people to talk about it. Because I think part of it is just ageism. None of us wants to be those old people, right? I've had 95-year-olds sit in my office and tell me they didn't want to move to friend's home because they didn't want to go be with those old people. And it's not because the 95-year-old doesn't know that she's 95. It's because she doesn't want to be seen as old, because we try to other it. We try to say, well, that's them. It's not me. And so those old people need to do the planning, not me. And the sooner we can bring that together and go, oh no, it's us, the better off we're going to be. So I'm working on it. I'm not there. I'm not done yet though.
And that would be great, and have it online too.
Yeah.
So, because that is a difficult subject to think about.
Thank you.
So Karen, one of the things that I see a lot in planning is my clients will say, I don't want to go into assisted living. I want to stay home. I'm going to stay home. I'm going to stay here until the day I die. And so I know that's not always practical, but what does it look like from your end as far as the housing market, or creating their homes for age friendly, or considering downsizing, relocating so that they can do that? Are you seeing trends, or what's it look like from?
Well, first of all, right now, a lot of people that do own their house are sitting on a lot of equity.
Mhm.
So they have a large amount that they can use to do whatever they want. Some of them are wanting to downsize to a smaller home and get a one-level home. And there are ways to age in place. So by remodeling a bathroom so your shower just walks in. You're widening your doors to fit a wheelchair or a walker. There's lowering some of your counter heights and things of that sort to do, to cook and do different things. There are ways to age in place. And a lot of people are doing that. And to hire certain people to come in. And that's a great opportunity. There's a lot of those, and I'm sure you could direct them as far as to where to go or which person based on their needs.
There's a lot of different home care agencies in Guilford County alone. There's over 60 different home care agencies. So you have your pick. Home care is typically going to run you somewhere between $25 to $29 an hour. in Guilford County.
Yeah.
And there's minimum hours, so like you at least a 4-hour shift. Some companies it's at least a 6-hour shift, so they're not going to just pop in for an hour and it be
Right.
$24. You've got to you're going to have them for a certain number of hours. And that is something people need to think about as they're doing financial planning too, right? Like, what do I want? Where do I think I'm going to want to go? What's it going to cost? I do want to mention there is a website that Genworth maintains called the Genworth Cost of Care Survey. If you just Google Genworth Cost of Care Survey, it will take you to the website and you can look up by zip code what care costs for assisted living, home care, skilled nursing, anywhere in the country.
How do you spell
Genworth, Genw,
it? G is in George.
G is in George, Genworth, and then cost of care survey. And so you can look up what things cost anywhere. I think that's really useful, especially if you're doing any sort of long distance caregiving. What's it going to cost in a particular area? The other side of that with home care is people often go, I don't want to pay $24, $25, $29 an hour. So they try to hire someone privately and pay cash under the table. I get it. The risk
You're
you're taking,
running a risk.
you're
yeah.
running a risk there. You really should be hiring that person as a household employee and doing taxes and doing all the things which nobody wants to do. But if you need to be doing a background check, you need a driving record, you need a drug screen, you need all those things that an agency is providing that if you're just hiring somebody off of Craigslist, you're not getting. And you also need insurance because if that individual gets hurt in your home, that's on your insurance if they're not carrying their own
So
liability.
when you add up
insurance.
all of that, it's probably best just to hire that person
Well-
that already has the insurance and they've
All those
screened
things.
them and done all of
Right.
that.
The biggest risk, I think, is you get someone in there who steals.
Yes.
I haven't seen it here, but you've heard people talk about that they're going to kind of pod, kind of like we all bubbled we had our little bubble.
Well, there's actually a
So
new law that you can build those tiny houses on your property. And they passed it as it can be, I think, I forgot exactly, half of whatever your house is, you can build on that, on your property. That's another great thing. So then they're still independent, but right next door to you. So there's a lot of options there. For,
There's a lot of options if you plan ahead.
Exactly.
It's when you don't plan
Yeah.
ahead that you don't have any options.
You're right.
And
Right.
have conversations with your whole family.
Well, and I see
Yeah.
people being resistant to moving because they think, all right, using an example, granted, I tend to work with the wealthier clients. So using an example of like a Wellspring, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to buy in and then I'm going to have the monthly. Well, they're sitting on a home with all this equity. And to realize, okay, what are you going to do with the money from the sale of your home? How can we turn that into what will be income? How, are you look at it, annuitizing it, or are you going to put it in high interest savings, or are you going to invest it in the market? But realizing that money can work for them, that's in the equity of their home now. You see things, I don't work with it personally, but you see things about reverse mortgages.
Yeah.
You see more, but ways that people can tap into their equity for their care needs. But the other thing I talk to them about is socialization, which I know we've talked about because a lot of times people are more isolated than they realize in their home. And then also that they're not going to have the cost of maintaining a home. So yes, you moved into the facility, but you may have 1 or 2 meals covered a day. You probably, what are your utility costs going to be? And I think everyone tends to underestimate what their home maintenance expenses are,
and what we
especially
have
if they're
seen.
in an older home that they've been in for a long time.
And that's something we have seen as people have aged in their home, they've neglected the maintenance.
Yeah.
And there are bathrooms leaking, there's roofs leaking, there's a lot of maintenance on that home, and they may not get as much as they would had they, maintained it. But you've done it for 40 years, you don't want to do it anymore. So having that place that you
Well,
can
and
just move to.
that it's not like you're necessarily, if you move into a retirement community, you're not just adding this on. This is an additional cost. There's some trade-offs for cost of
One
ownership.
thing that I think is really coming along, and there is going to be a 55 and older community that they're going to be building here in Guilford County. And it's patio homes, one level, you have pickleball, they have swimming, they have all these different activities and everything, all within the same community. But you can shut that door and leave because all of your grass is maintained, your yard, your house, and everything else is taken care of. You buy that house, and so you're gaining. You can sell it when you leave, and but you also have the pleasure of going wherever you want, closing the door.
Do you have to be 55 to move in? Because this, again, I'm one of these that's just ready.
I think
I'm
yes, they
ready.
do. I know but that's coming, and I think they're going to start building one in I think either the end of this year or the first of next year. But we actually, when we were in Raleigh over Mother's Day, we went to the Del Webb community because I knew they were going to be coming here because I wanted to see what some of those homes were. It's like I could move right into one of those. They were gorgeous. For some people, it's good. Reverse mortgages of the 70s and 80s, it was not good. Right now, reverse mortgages are controlled by the government, so you can't. There were some scams out there. But if you, like I said, a lot of people living in their homes right now have a lot of equity. Their mortgage is paid off. So they may have a $500,000 home that they're just sitting on, and that allows them to take advantage of their equity in their home.
The one thing though, right? Like if they're gonna do if it's a couple and they're gonna do a reverse mortgage, they've got to have both of their names on the deed to the house. Because what will, like, let's say the house is in the husband's name and it's a husband and wife and they do a reverse mortgage and the husband dies, guess what? The wife doesn't own the house, and the reverse mortgage company is going to be saying the house needs to be sold to repay the reverse mortgage. So that if you're a couple, you have to make sure that you're doing it on a house that is in
So
both your
tenants
names.
of entirety doesn't cover that?
She was just saying if it's only in one name, though.
If it's only in one
so
name,
she's just saying they need it to be tenancy by the entireties.
Yeah.
Another issue with that popped up recently for me, that the family wanted to keep the home and learned that the parents had a reverse mortgage on it, and they didn't understand the process of what it meant to keep it, which means they have a very limited time period to pay off that mortgage, get rid of the reverse, and refinance, do their own thing in order to keep it, or it goes into foreclosure.
Yeah.
So, you also, prior to doing it, maybe want to have that conversation with the family and what makes sense. But it's a great tool for those
For
who don't
aging in
have
place.
for aging in
Staying
place,
as-
for those who don't have the other means to cover in-home care or the renovations that need to be done.
Right.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, pros and cons.
Can I touch on a few tax things real quick?
I was just going to ask you, actually, we've talked about finances
Yeah.
and how much things are and things that change. All of a sudden the Medicare, you have extra expenses there. Are there any ways to protect?
Well, I'll just talk a little bit about the home, and I kind of lost my train of thought, but
Sorry.
I do get questions occasionally on primary residence and is my home going to be taxed? And so for most people, it would be the primary residence exclusion. So it'd be $250,000 for a single person and $500,000 for a couple married filing jointly. It used to be that it was a no-brainer that everyone was going to be under the capital gains exclusions. But now, with as much as home prices have gone up, I am seeing where, especially maybe seeing it creep up a little bit in our area, but we have clients that are in, Florida or other areas that have really gained in value. And so we have had some that we've had to actually run the calculation for capital gains, would be long-term capital gains treatment.
Isn't that changing though? We were just talking about that at the regional realtors, that it's,
You might know better than me. I'm not aware of any changes to the primary residence
Someone was
exclusion or
saying-
anything
okay.
coming up with the 2000 tax law is scheduled to sunset at the end of 2025. So we will, for estate tax law and also for income taxes, those of us in this world will be looking at that carefully to see if things sunset or if they change. But now there's primary residence exclusion, but if someone's looking at it, I encourage them to remember that their selling costs would reduce the amount of gains, and also that it's based on adjusted cost basis. So if someone bought their house in 1965 for $40,000 and that house is now worth $750,000, we're going in, we're like, but what have you done in terms of additions, improvements? You can't just include regular repairs and maintenance, but you can include additions and improvements as long as you can document those over time that would go towards adjusted cost basis. But they can
but who
look at
keeps that for 60 years?
Well,
You know? I mean,
Your client who still had a mortgage. That's who would still have
But
it.
you shredded it though.
Yeah, it's gone.
Be careful what you shred.
that's a good point.
Yeah. So anyway, but there are the tax considerations, and also on the subject of I'll just mention for tax planning with long-term care, for most married couples over the age of 65 under current tax law, they aren't able to itemize. So we won't go into all that. But where I see couples itemizing is once that if they're in even independent living, they get something, usually isn't enough to qualify, but they'll get something about the medical deduction that they can take. Medical deductions don't start for the purpose of tax deductions until 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. But once we see people are on care, they're in assisted living, they're meeting those qualifiers for care, then typically their expenses are tax deductible. And we can even see a single or a married couple that's been at a pretty high tax bracket go down. And that really gives us some tax planning opportunities if we can get their income down due to medical needs. Then we might even be looking at things like Roth conversions. So there can be some good planning opportunities that can come out of higher medical expenses that may occur.
When I work with clients, we start with a process where we have them complete a worksheet basically that gives us the assets, family information, all of that, and then we convert that into a spreadsheet format that then becomes part of their plan. Then we create a plan. We have contact information for all of the family members. We provide in case of emergency memorandum, like where do you find all of your usernames and passwords? That's critical now. We do so much online. So where are your kids going to find that? Where's your spouse going to find that if you lose a spouse? So we put a plan together. By the time we're finished, whether it's a will plan or a trust plan, everything that the family needs to know is consolidated into that with exactly who to call. It has the financial advisors in there. It has CPAs in there, because, like I said in the beginning, I dig deep, and it's not just you come in and say, I want my plan done. We're gonna put a plan together that's going to work for your family and where they can find it all. And then having a team is really important. What I see when people pass away, it's usually our office or like Ashley's office would get the call, and then we're immediately on the phone with each other saying, okay, well, this person passed away. What's next? And so we're always collaborating, working together, and making sure that the family knows what to do. Because if they have both of us, they're generally, everything they need to know is between our two offices.
The thing I always say to families, because when I'm dealing with them, they may or may not have done all the paperwork, or they've done it somewhere, but who knows where. But if they've got like a power of attorney or a will, the first question I ask is, where is it?
Mhm.
Right? And they'll be like, it's in some filing. And who has copies? Right? Because the power of attorney, like my son is the power of attorney. Does he have a copy of that document? Well, no. Does
Does he know?
Does he know
Does
he's
he
the
know
power of attorney?
what's
Yes.
Oh,
But
yeah.
what I always say to clients, and you can tell me if this is a bad idea, but I always say, like, you should have a copy, easily accessible, right? Like in an unlocked desk drawer somewhere. And then whoever is named in those documents should also have copies. So like I have all those documents done for myself because heaven forbid I sit up here and say this and then don't have these things done. And my brother is named as like our second. Like my husband's the first power of attorney. My brother is my second. So my brother has copies of all of those documents. And I'm like, now what has he done with them? I have no idea. But I gave them to him, and that's the idea, is that, you know, people who are involved in your decision making should have copies of the documents that give him that power, so that if something happens, like if my husband and I are both in a car crash and my husband passes away and my brother's got to make decisions for me, he needs to be able to go pick up that piece of paper and go straight to the hospital or wherever he's got to go and say, I'm the person in charge. He doesn't need to be going to my house to try to dig through my files and hope he can find it. That's the point.
And we have clients who don't necessarily want to share, but one place you should never keep them is in your safety deposit box,
Oh, yeah.
because if you're incapacitated, nobody else can necessarily get in there to take care of things. But especially your will, if it's locked up in a safe deposit box at the bank, then it's frozen until an estate is opened. Well, you have to open the estate then without a will, and then get it processed through. So it's much more complicated. Safe deposit boxes are not where you want to keep those legal documents. In a desk drawer is fine. I always figure if the house burns down, you're probably not burning down with it, and they can always be redone.
I
And
like the
we
idea of a
can
little
get by with a
pocket card
copy.
or something like that for someone to
Yeah.
keep in their wallet. That's a good idea. So
Yep.
then, because like with this client that I said, they didn't know where the will was.
Mhm.
They didn't know who the attorney was because I asked, you know, who the attorney is. No. Having that little card would have helped.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll touch on our system. We use a pretty robust financial planning software for all of the planning. We can connect in outside assets so the client can always see their full financial plan. It is part of our service to every single client that they have access on their end to the financial plan. They can see it, but one of the features of that is that there is a very secure electronic vault. And so it's organized by folders that come in, and so we upload all their tax returns. They have their own personal folder, private folder that we can't see. I always joke, I'm like, yeah, I can't see what's in that folder. But there's a legal folder, and it is on our agenda to every single review meeting to make sure that their financial plan is up to date. And we have on there when was the last time that they did their documents, and verification that we have copies of those documents in the vault, a reminder to them that they're there. The other thing is family meetings. So we are a family office firm. We're very focused on multi-generational planning, and a lot of times we're not getting into the specifics of the finances with the next gen, but we really encourage, especially with our higher net worth clients, but really if you want to bring your adult child or a sibling in to be part of the meeting, to make sure we're on the same page, we will schedule a meeting to talk about things that are related to
And
transition
that's
of
probably
care.
important too. So they hear you say what you want.
Mhm.
So it's not something that's written on a piece of paper. They actually say, this is what she wants.
It's also helpful for us because if the client does become incapacitated later on, or passes away, it's helpful for us to have some sort of relationships established with the adult children. So they're not like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know who you all are. So we really do encourage it to truly be in a family environment, and to get family members involved, whether it's transitioning for care or for purposes of better understanding the estate and transferring assets later on.
Yeah, the important thing is that review process. You know, typically people meet with their financial advisor at least annually. They should be reviewing their estate plan at least every 3 years. And if your plan is older than 2018, you really need to review it. Our power of attorney statute completely changed. Things are actually a little bit easier, more robust. So, you know, look at what you have and see when the last time you updated it, and then consider updating.
And when getting remarried with adult children, huge, and we do all see that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I think the healthcare power of attorney is fine. You can actually go to the Secretary of State's website and download their advanced directives and fill them out. Just really think through who you're naming. I think that's the disadvantage of doing things on your own, like you asked about the DIY earlier, is that if you're not getting some advice on how you're naming or who you're picking for your healthcare agents, you could create some conflict in the family. But if you're pretty confident about it, then doing the healthcare on your own is okay. I would strongly encourage someone not to do an online power of attorney or anything else. Especially as seniors, you want a power of attorney that incorporates all of the different powers someone really needs to take care of you to your dying day. And that could include doing some Medicaid planning. It could include executing the deed to the house. So you really want it to be robust enough to handle all of the things that you're not thinking about that could come up and likely will come up.
Yeah. And the one that you don't think will happen, happens.
It's usually the one that does, yeah.
The law school at Wake Forest used to do a clinic at least once a year. I think they've done it twice a year, where they will do free elder consults for people and try to get this kind of paperwork done.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when the next one coming up is, but if you go to their it's like their Facebook page. I see the things come up there. I'll try to look it up.
I mean, there is a statutory power of attorney that will get someone by, but for seniors, I strongly caution against it.
So it
But it's
sounds
better than
like
nothing.
we're all saying, plan now. It doesn't matter what age you're at, whether you're, I haven't even thought of it, 18, just plan something, but you do need that.
Yeah.
Because I remember my daughter went off to school and she needed something, and I called the doctor. He wouldn't talk to me. I'm like, I'm still paying her insurance. That doesn't matter.
That doesn't
She's
matter.
18.
They also don't have to
Yeah.
tell you their grades at school.
Yeah,
even if
they
you're paying the
don't.
tuition.
You're paying the tuition. You don't have to.
Yeah.
So having that directive there, but plan so you're empowered. You can set your course of what you want to do in the future.
Yeah.
And know, though, that can change.
Oh, yeah.
And it's okay.
Mhm.
It's okay for you to say, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to go here. That's okay. But at least you have a plan.
Right.
Love a plan.
Clearly, we all do.
Is there anything else y'all can think of that?
It's been great. Let's get 50 more people in here next
I
time.
know.
Yeah,
You'll bring
6
friends
months.
next time.
Thank you.